There are writers who tell stories, and then there are those who give voices to the voiceless, shining light on places the world too often looks away from. Today's guest has done exactly that, transforming real life tragedy into unforgettable works of courage, empathy, and truth. A two-time National Book Award finalist, this author has written Sold, a groundbreaking story of human trafficking that became an award-winning film, Never Fall Down, the remarkable true account of a boy who survived the killing fields of Cambodia, and I Am Malala, the inspiring story of the young activist's fight for education. Her work bridges journalism and literature, revealing the strength of the human spirit through stories of survival and hope. Please welcome an author whose writing continues to awaken compassion and inspire change, Patricia McCormick.
Wow, thank you. That is a really beautiful introduction.
Thank you, David. When you were growing up, what kinds of books or authors first made you fall in love with storytelling? Was there one book that made you want to become a writer?
So when I was growing up, there wasn't a field known as young adult literature. There were books that were intended to teach kids how to behave as opposed to entertain them or inform them. But there was a series of books that I really loved, Cherry Ames Student Nurse. And there was a whole series, Cherry Ames Army Nurse, Ames Dude Ranch Nurse. And she was this very independent young woman who was out saving lives, doing important work. She also was dating the cute, handsome doctor. But I realized it's easy to kind of make fun of those stories or think of them as slight. But I realized I was filling my mind with these stories of this very independent young woman who went out in the world to make a difference. And I think it really, really sunk in.
You helped tell Malala's story in I Am Malala, one of the most inspiring memoirs of this generation. What was that collaboration like, and how did you find the balance between your storytelling voice and someone else's lived experience?
What a great question that is. She is an extraordinary human being, and she is as brave and as bright as she seems to be. She's also a normal kid, or she was at the time I met her when she was 15. And she worried about making friends at school. She worried about her looks. Um, when I first met her, the day that we met, um, she had been interviewed earlier that day by, I think, a German television crew, and they showed her a video of a Taliban soldier saying, "We will kill you, Malala. We might not have succeeded, but the first time, but we will kill you." And I said to her, "That seems to me very irresponsible of those journalists to show you that." And she said, "It's not irresponsible. That's my life. They do want to kill me, but they can't kill my message." And I instantly knew I was in the presence of somebody with vision and with soul and with real faith in her mission and the rightness of it, and the fact that she wasn't just doing it for herself. It was challenging because when I met her, she'd already been interviewed by every journalist that you can think of. And so her answers had gotten a bit canned. And I thought that this is going to be a complete failure. I'm not going to get anything new out of her. And my goal was to write for young adults. So it was very important to her, she said, that kids who read about her didn't put her up on a pedestal, but saw her as a regular kid, so that anything that she did that was inspiring made them feel like, yes, they too could take a stand. So I asked her all these questions, and it was just, going nowhere. And then I asked her to show me what games she might have played when she was a kid back at home. She got up out of her chair and we played this hopscotch game. And everything changed after that. She dropped into her body. She dropped into her persona as a little girl, that person that she was before this happened. And then out came all these really wonderful stories. And I shouldn't brag, but I do think that the young readers edition of the book is better for that reason, that it wasn't canned, and it wasn't for adults. It was really straight from her heart. So your other question about how do you balance my storytelling, or how does an author balance their storytelling style versus the voice of the person that you're trying to represent? And I had other experiences trying on other people's voices. When I wrote about Arnchorn Pond, who was as a child, the Khmer Rouge made him play music for them, and they made him become a child soldier. Well, I'm little old white lady, basically. I am not a young Cambodian man. I have not been through anything like he's been through, but it was through long, long, long interviews and really listening to how he spoke that I was able to, like an impersonator almost, take on the sound of his voice. And I tried to do that with Malala too. And it was harder. She had a formality in the way that she spoke, that beautiful, formal Pakistani English. Um, and I wrote the book that way, and I turned it into her, and she didn't like it. And it was devastating. I'd written it on deadline, and you don't want to let Malala down. But she basically said that it was too formal. And could I make it sound a little bit more conversational, which was no problem. I was happy to do that. And so that's what we did. But again, you have to, your question is so smart because as the writer, you've got to get out of the way and let the other person, the person whose story you're telling, you've got to let them speak. They need you because of your skill set and the fact that they are not able to write a memoir. Now, Malala could write a memoir, but at the time she was 15 and she was supposed to be going to school. So my skills were needed so that she could do her schoolwork and do her activism work. Arn needed my skills because his literacy was low. But there's a balance, absolutely, between the two. And I'm always very clear that I come second.
Did you work on writing it conversationally with Malala, or did you write it yourself and then you had Malala just proofread it or like read it afterward?
So I went back and reworked it and made it a little more casual. Then I gave it to her again and she marked it up. It's just like working with a professor. She redlined it, she crossed things out, she had questions. So it was a very lively collaboration. You wouldn't want somebody who says, "Oh, that's great," and you wouldn't want somebody who is, difficult and critical. It was really a good collaboration.
Did you get most of the information from Malala herself, or did you get most of the information through past interviews that she already has been through?
Good question. Both. I did a ton of research reading the other interviews and reading the adult version of the book. And then I made a timeline at home on a piece of poster board. And then I dropped in the significant events that the world knew about, or that things that had been established in her biography. And then I dropped in the individual stories of what it was like to be a kid during those things that were. It was much more about adding feelings rather than facts.
Your book, Sold, has helped so many readers feel seen, yet it's also been one of the most banned books in America. How do you process that contradiction?
Well, as you know, Sold is a book about child trafficking. I wrote the book. I went to India and I went to Nepal because those were two countries that had done a lot to fight trafficking, and they were open about having me there. Um, I went into the brothels there. I went into jails. I drew on some of my own experiences as a survivor of sexual harm. I wrote the book to be part of the solution. And so to hear from people who don't want kids to read this book and who call it pornography is really disrespectful, much less to me and much more so to the girls who told me their stories so that the world could understand what was happening. And for book banners or people who challenge books to say that they're protecting kids by not exposing them to this kind of story, you're not really protecting them. You're actually making them more vulnerable because, as you noted, it's helped a lot of kids be seen. And when I go to schools, invariably some child will say something like that has happened to me or is happening in my home, and they're able to get help. Other kids in the classroom are deeply respectful when that one student stands up and confides that this has happened. So they develop empathy. And then other kids get involved in anti-trafficking. They raise money. One group gave up their Christmas presents one year so they could send the money. So by taking that book away from kids, you deprive the kids who need to be seen of being seen and getting help. You deprive the other kids of a chance to really exercise empathy, and you deprive kids of a chance to really feel effective in this world. So it's very frustrating. It's frustrating too because when people say it's pornography, I worked really hard to use language. I knew I had to write a difficult scene of this young girl the first time that she's with a customer in the brothel. That has to be in the book. It's essential to the story. But I tried to use language that was not graphic, that was from the point of view of the 13-year-old girl who is bewildered and scared and who's in pain and doesn't even understand what's happening to her. It is not graphic. It's heartbreaking and it's difficult, but I'm always aware that I'm writing for other people's kids and I'm writing about a tough topic. I don't need to brutalize people with the language. I can be careful with the language and still deliver the story. So for all those reasons, it makes me sad. Um, and there's a part of me too that wonders, people on the right end of the political spectrum talk a lot about wanting to fight pedophiles. They want to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. They're worried about a child trafficking ring that Hillary Clinton is running out of the basement of a pizza parlor. Well, here's a book that's really about trafficking. So to me, there's a disconnect or maybe a hypocrisy in this interest that they seem to have in fighting pedophilia. So should I tell you about going to Alabama?
Yeah, can you?
Yeah. So it was really amazing to go into um, a hotbed of book banning. So this little library in Fairhope, Alabama, refused to take Sold off the shelves or move it from the young adult section to the adult section. And they lost $40,000 in state funding for that decision. So I asked, is there anything I could do to help? And they invited me to come down and speak. And I was prepared to be challenged by the book banners. And they were there in the audience. They were pointed out to me. But I spoke about all the things I just told you about what the book does for kids and why it's important to make it available to them. And they never said anything. Some of them got up and left. And then partway through, I said, "Is there anybody here who is part of that challenge who wants to talk to me directly?" And so there's people who stand up at school board meetings and they read one page from the book, say it's pornography, and then they leave. But here's an author right in front of you who is willing to talk civilly and calmly, and they didn't want to engage.
What would you say to those people who didn't read enough of your book to get the full picture, but decide to ban your book anyway?
I think that, and I have engaged with Moms for Liberty several times. I've engaged with the head of the Alabama Public Library system, not in a hostile way. I just call and say, let's talk. I want to hear from you what you're thinking. What you hear from a lot of people is fear. A lot of the Moms for Liberty, the truly ones who are actually moms and not just troublemakers, they really think that this kind of writing is bad for their kids. Okay, so don't let your child read it, but you can't make it inaccessible to other people's children. But I think where we meet, I try to find common ground. And I think we talk about, yeah, we all want to protect kids from being sexualized against their will. How can we work together there? We all love libraries. How can we support a library and support intellectual freedom and curiosity, but not stamp out the things that we don't like. So I found a lot of places where we can agree, even things about the book. Some people will say, yeah, it's a hard book to read. It doesn't belong in middle school. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It doesn't belong in middle school. It only belongs in high schools. And when people hear that, they're taken aback. I think that they aren't always as well informed as they might be. So, and at the end of each of the conversations, each of them has said, well, the book really does have literary merit, and I'm going to have to think about it. Or one group said, okay, we're going to take it off our list, but they didn't. So that was kind of disheartening. I think that we're never going to get anywhere screaming at each other from different parts of the internet and dropping bombs, lobbing bombs at the other person. I also think that some people who are involved in the issue, um, they're reacting in an emotional way and that they haven't thought through all the consequences and all the aspects of what it means to ban a book. And so uh, we can engage in a dialogue where I learn from them what they're worried about, and they learn from me what my views are. One mom said that a scene of a rape of a girl is going to make girls not want to have sex with men. It's going to make them gay. Okay, we can't agree on that one. But
That's a huge stretch.
that was informative for me to hear. That tells you how deeply fearful they are. And it also tells you it might not really be about this is pornography. Their agenda might be cloaked under other issues.
You've studied traditional journalism and worked as a reporter. And now with journalism changing due to AI due to the influence of social media, how do you see those shifts affecting the way truth is reported and stories are told? Has that evolution changed the way you approach your own writing?
Great question. I don't know that I'm going to be able to give you a good answer to this because I mostly feel worried and a little not bewildered exactly, but I'm not, I should know more about AI. Here's what I do know. The stuff that I read that is AI generated is clunky and full of stupid errors. And I'm hoping that people will see that and discredit it. But I think we're always going to need reporters to go out and cover the fire, and talk to the people who just lost their homes. AI can't do that. We're still going to need people to go up to legislators and hold them accountable for the votes they cast or the spending that they endorse. We're always going to need real people to pull out the stories that are difficult. And we need real people to do it with empathy, and we need real people to do it with tenacity. And I just don't think AI comes anywhere close to that. So while I'm fearful, and I've had my books scraped for the internet for AI, um, and feel as though that's a violation of my intellectual property, I remain hopeful that we can use AI for research, for the things it's really good at, like finding patterns or, diagnosing diseases, for instance. But, and that's not a good journalistic example, but we can use AI to quickly sort through the things that the human mind can't. But then we need the human touch to render them as stories.
Do you think that AI will potentially take over the roles of writers and authors?
I worry about it because there's so much, it's so nimble. You can say, write a story in the style of Patty McCormick. Okay, now make it uh, in prose poems. Or take a story about a girl from Nepal who gets sold and she ends up in a brothel in Calcutta and she figures out how to escape. All you have to do is put in the plot line and AI will do it, and they'll do it in any number of voices, as you know. So I do worry, and I worry for actors and actresses and voice actors and actresses how are they going to protect themselves? Um, yeah, I don't have a good answer.
You've heard from readers all over the world who've been moved by your books. Was there an email or message that really stayed with you, or one that reminded you why you write these stories?
I'm really glad that you asked me that, and I thought about it a little bit. Um, I got so many wonderful emails and some that are really funny. Readers will say, "Oh, I hated the way that book ended," or "You're one of my favorite authors. Do you know J.K. Rowling?" So, slightly candid
Do
and
you know J.K. Rowling?
no.
Oh,
Um, but I will say that there's one that comes to mind. So I wrote a book called Cut, which is about a girl who's self-injuring. And I wrote that book a long time ago before people really knew what cutting was really about. And I wanted to shine light on a behavior that is hidden and done in secret and is very off-putting to other people. It's very scary to think of somebody cutting. I got it. So I got a lot of emails from girls who said, "Wow, you must be a cutter to have done this so well," and I'm not. But they said, you told our story that we weren't able to tell ourselves, and now people understand us." I got some letters saying that that was irresponsible and that it makes cutting contagious. But I got one email from a mom who said that she picked up the book and she was prepared to hate it and to hate me. And when she was finished, she understood her daughter in a way that she never had before. And I really took that to heart because it took some guts for her to do that. It took curiosity and love of her child to do it. But it was an unexpected response.
Patricia, every page you've written gives readers permission to face what hurts, and hope anyway. You've turned silence into voice, fear into understanding, and tragedy into connection. Thank you for writing with such courage and for reminding us that compassion, when shared through a story, is its own kind of resistance.